What's up, Freddie? It is 6 o'clock here on Tuesday. Welcome to our grid meeting this week or this month. We're going to be covering a pretty cool topic, actually, which is just going to be how to invest in apartments, how to scale your portfolio, kind of going from one to many. We'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of going through that process, some of the challenges along the way. We're going to do some breakdown of just the numbers, how to kind of figure out kind of what makes a good deal, maybe how to buy something that's either a value add, and then what it's going to look like to make that a little bit better of a return for you, or just if you're looking to buy something turnkey, what are some numbers you're going to be looking for? First off, we'll just kind of go do a little bit of intros. And so my name is Cory King. I'm a real estate agent here in Knoxville, Tennessee with the Heartstrong Home Group. I'm also an investor in this area. So a lot of times I'm looking at things through just the eyes of an investor. It's always kind of a numbers first and then back everything out from there. I've got my partner here, Justin Myers, who's kind of my community manager, going to be co-hosting this along with me here. And so we wanted to bring this group together as a way for people to network, to have a true investor education-based meetup, something that people can come to each month, learn something out of it, meet, network with some cool people, and look to bring some deals to people along the way. I think it's kind of the three things people are looking for out of a meetup. So that's what we're looking to do here. What we're just looking to, again, just continue to bring some value to everybody along the way. The best way to connect with us is certainly here through gridknoxville.com. That's the best way to stay as informed on what we're doing on a month-to-month basis. And we'll go ahead and we'll make sure to put our contact info into the chat. And I would say for you to do the same as well if you're here online with us. I'll go kind of around the room a little bit here just to kind of chat and get to know some of their folks. And I would say we'll encourage you online as well to kind of go ahead and do the same. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Justin, you're first up.
Sure. So my name is Justin Myers. I am a director of sales for the Heartstrong Home Group. I'm a residential and commercial agent. And so my investing background right now is we're building some spec houses, some new construction, we should call them flips, some new construction spec homes. And I'm looking for an owner finance property in East Knoxville for myself. That's what I'm looking for today.
Very nice. I like it. We can find that.
So land case, square one properties construction, do some single family investments, rental properties, some flips, and we're building some new builds in the Pigeon Forge area for short-term rentals. So,
okay. So that's what's up.
I'm looking for any kind of deal you can bring, apartments, single families. Yeah, I'm open to anything.
Oh, for anything.
Are you guys going to hold those or are you going to sell those?
Yeah. Good move for sure.
Deb, I talked to Deb Crines today. I don't know if you know Deb.
Yeah.
Deb has been recovering from a fractured spine, but she's got a builder. They've got some lots lined up. They're going to build 20 short-term rentals.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah. I think those are going to be coming to market. We'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to be huge for sure. I'll have to reach out to Deb. I didn't realize she got her off to check up on her.
A while ago.
Wow. Jeez. Check out and say hi.
Well, my name is Robbie Baker. I'm new to real estate. I'm also a third generation contractor. So I've grown up in the construction industry. My family has quite a bit of property management, rentals and stuff too. So I've got some experience in that area, but from the real estate side and actually being able to work deals, I'm here to learn as much as I can and to meet some cool people.
So that's awesome, man. Welcome to it. That's fantastic, actually. Just we got online joining us.
Rob Scott.
Rob, feel free if you want to unmute yourself and kind of chime in a little bit. We'd love to kind of hear more about you.
Oh, awesome, guys. Thank you very much for doing this. My name is Rob Scott. I'm the owner of the Forgiveness Link, and investing in rentals and flips and all that fun stuff is started to catch my eye, and I'm really in the learning stage of this whole process. So I saw what you guys are doing, and it's like, this sounds like something that I should be a part of and start learning. So
that's awesome. Well, man, welcome, welcome to the group for sure. Is there anything specific you're maybe looking for right now or looking to kind of get out of this? How can we really help you?
The apartment rentals really caught my eye. So I am very curious about that. I know people rent out houses and stuff. The market here is kind of crazy. So apartments, rentals in general. So passive income is what I'm learning.
That's what it's all about, right? And the in apartments, though, one thing what it really does for you is it allows you to just spread yourself out a little bit more. And so versus a single family home or even like a duplex, if that say tenant moves out and you're or one side of a duplex is out, like your occupancy rate obviously is just gone, and so therefore your cash flow is just not as strong. And so, but if you've got say a 24 unit apartment building and you've got 4 units are vacant, but you've got 20 that are full, okay, not as bad, right? The bills are still getting paid, money's coming in, and we're just not spread as thin, and that just kind of really diversify yourself overall. Cool, man. Welcome to the group for sure. Some important legal stuff for us just to touch base on really quick. Right, we are here giving you our perspective. The state of Tennessee likes for us to be very clear in the sense of knowing, all of our respective roles. And so I'm coming to this meetup as, an agent, as an investor side. I would say just, do your due diligence on anything you hear kind of in this room. Obviously talk with your attorney, talk with your CPA. If anything sounds right, obviously just vet it, kind of do your homework at the end of the day is kind of how I always like to just say
invest at your own risk.
Yeah, invest at your own risk. Absolutely. All right. We're just here to bring our perspective to things, and we're looking just to hear other opinions. That's the whole point of this group, right? Is just to get people together to hear different perspectives and learn from, people's wins and also mistakes that happen along the way. I often found we oftentimes certainly learn from our own mistakes. And so if you're open to sharing, mistakes that you've made, it only helps everybody else get better at the end of the day, right? And that's always huge value there. So let's dive into it. I mean, just kind of the pros and cons of buying apartments. Certainly you can increase your overall income stream and wealth faster by buying one building versus buying several single family homes. You're diversifying your risk. So if one of those units goes vacant, we just kind of talked about that. There's other units there just to support you along the way. You can massively increase the value of the asset by going in and putting some money into the building and then raising the rents. And then certainly there's a good tax advantage overall for buying an apartment as far as what you can depreciate over time and what you can roll around. Real quick, I want to kind of take it. Does anyone here have any kind of experience, past stories with kind of buying apartments or knowing somebody? Yeah, Justin, what's up?
Yeah, so years ago, we in another life, Jamie and I had a commercial property management business. And so for an absentee owner, we took over an apartment complex up in Fountain City. And the guy selling it had cooked the books, he had a big portfolio. He had taken some of his good tenants and moved them into his other properties. And not told us about some of the issues there, ranging from bed bugs, people actively dealing drugs in the apartment. We ended up, I've done this before. We had to help the owner out a little bit. It was a friend of ours, so we ended up like putting up the money ourselves for the utility deposits.
Yep.
There's some startup costs there. And then we went through and we were renovating them, like bootstrapping. Okay, I've got $1,000 extra this month. We can do 2 of these units, or we can, fix the black mold looking in the laundry room or whatever, going like unit by unit to fix this stuff.
Yeah.
Evicting people who turns out hadn't been paying already for months at a time.
Sure.
So, but you can, once you did those repairs, you can, it's leapfrog.
Yeah.
So if we were adequately capitalized, like if we were buying this, the good news was we had several vacancies, so we could have The upside would have been, hey, I could come in and do 6 or 7 units at one time.
Yeah,
Maybe get a discount on materials, on labor, doing it kind of piecemeal was a little challenging.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I could see that being a horror show for
I'd be
sure.
really curious to see what it's worth now.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Wow,
That would have been 20, maybe 14.
sure.
Yep.
Wow, yeah, perfect time to buy it. Wow, right?
Mhm.
So I've helped some friends of mine buy a 5-unit building in East Knoxville here recently, and all of those tenants were month to month. There was no real like leases in place. It was very kind of loosely managed by the family that held the asset. Definitely got a good deal on it, and so tenants, thankfully, I guess, were open to the idea of us coming in, fixing the place up. The previous owners hadn't really done much, kind of neglecting the property. And so we got them all to agree to allow us to come in and kind of renovate the units, and then therefore like up their rents by, an average of about $200 a door starting out. They were all rented for about $500 a month, which is severely under rented, even for kind of a 1-bedroom in our market. It's still pretty severely under rented. So we were able to go there and talk with them and say, hey, we're gonna come in, we're gonna fix some of these issues you've got, put in some new flooring, some new paint. Everybody agreed with us to go ahead and kind of up their rents, which was cool. And by doing so, we spent honestly a couple grand per unit, just putting in some new flooring and new paint kind of thing. But we upped the value of that building by a good margin, $100K fold. And so the plan with that is to keep fixing up a little bit, eventually stabilize the asset, do a kind of a cash out refinance, and then hold it for the long term. One of those challenges we ran into, though, is kind of a blessing and a curse, is everybody in that building is related. And so they're all like, grandma lives in the far unit, and then it's all daughters and sisters and cousins and everybody like elsewhere. And so while that helped us play the tenant shuffle, hey, go stay with your sister next door for a couple of days, will we come and kind of like flip your unit over, they also fight like family as well. So there's some challenges that have come into play there on that deal. But I think overall, maybe the long-term play might just to let some of those folks maybe work themselves out to a degree. We signed everybody to like a year lease just to kind of stabilize it, so we can kind of position to do that full refinance. But then I think after that, it should be go let them kind of vacate it out, clean them up a little bit more, and then I don't know, maybe student housing it or something like that for where it's set. Is
Sure.
In a quasi historic area, but it was built in '82, so that was pretty good deal overall to pick up something like that in that neighborhood.
How about you, Lenny? Do you have any?
Yeah, you got anything, Lenny?
No multifamily.
Yeah.
Nothing now.
I had a triplex, that I purchased in the historic district.
Yeah.
That was a nightmare, so stay away from the historic district.
Yeah, certainly. Well, if you just if you're
Who was the
gonna,
one where the chimney got knocked down?
oh, that was an investor of mine. Yeah, that was Declan. He bought a beautiful home on Jefferson, which is right in the heart of Park Ridge here in East Knoxville, right in historic overlay, and put a new roof on it. And that part wasn't really the problem. It was when the roofers went up there and did it, the chimney was already like leaning dangerously into the property that was more than likely going to fall through the roof and potentially kill somebody. And collectively, they made the decision just to get rid of the roof or get rid of the chimney, not realizing that, hey, they're in historic overlay. And so city realized, hey, you just pulled the chimney down off of a historic property, so that needs to go back up. So then I found myself sitting in a city council or historic council meeting at like 8 a.m. My client's on the West Coast, so it's 5 a.m. his time, and we're having to sit there, before the historical society and say, hey, like, my bad, didn't know. And thankfully, they were actually pretty cool with the process overall. They gave us a timeline for a new chimney to have to go back up. But they didn't really try to come down on us with any kind of fines or things like that. They understood. That was actually a very cool conversation for them to say, like, okay, hey, like, our bad, we made the mistake. We're going to go ahead and rectify it, and all is forgiven. But that was a good deal. That was a good little triplex.
I found the city here to be, I mean, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but they're very available and communicative.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll make you work for it a
But
little
I've
bit.
been
too.
able to,
Yeah,
As of recently, I would say it's getting pretty complicated.
yeah,
yeah,
Trying to get stuff.
sure.
stuff pushed through.
Yeah, now it's been a nightmare, but previously it's been pretty like, oh, you can just walk into this
No,
building,
you
talk to
can't, yeah.
NBC.
You can't walk in anymore, so
Yep.
everything fine, and I believe a lot of their inspectors walked off the job, so.
Oh, sure.
Knoxville, So, which complicates.
Expect some delays. So if you're building
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
expect some delays probably, right?
Yeah.
Or doing some big remodels. Good to know. Good to know. So just some cons, right? We talked a little bit about some of the pros and a little bit of horror stories. I think some of our horror stories are a little bit of the cons, right? Of understanding where you're buying this asset or where this property's set. And so, it's harder to diversify your market exposure and buying a lot of them just because the overall cost, of a building is going to be by and large more expensive than if you're doing a small single family home or maybe in a duplex. You start getting into some bigger, apartment buildings, 24 unit, 50 unit, 100 unit. You're talking some just more capital needed in order to pull that over. Your turnover rates and operating costs tend to be a little bit higher on those as well. If you're depending, I guess, on, the apartment complex, let's say on average, by and large, people are oftentimes staying a year, 2, maybe max in an apartment before they're moving, or if maybe they catch wind of, hey, it's $50 cheaper at this apartment complex right down the road, they might likely go ahead and jump on you versus I think your single family homes usually stretch out beyond 2, 3, 5 years so there's just going to be some extra costs associated with it all. And you're looking at just a higher cost of the asset, so just more expensive. And then just your financing pieces as well. 5 units or more are going to be financed with any kind of like a commercial loan, meaning your interest rate is typically going to be locked in for maybe a 5 or 10 years, sometimes interest only, instead of maybe a 30-year residential loan like you can do on up to a 4 unit. So if you're kind of young and starting out, maybe you want to get into investing, you look at a duplex, a triplex, a 4 unit building, something like that you can still finance with even up to like an FHA type of loan and get in and live in 1 unit and rent out the other 3. And you can massively just increase your net worth and just your wealth by going that route first, rather than saying just the traditional single family route. But so that's one thing to consider is just when you're buying something that's 5 units or more, you're going to have to go to a commercial lender in order to get that deal done. If you've got a good relationship with them, might be able to cut you some breaks here and there, or if they're a local bank, they might be able to do a decent deal on there, but that just comes with just networking and knowing who you're working with on it all. Yeah, so we just kind of touched a little bit on it. Use your duplex, your triplex, your quad, starting small. These are certainly great ways just to get started, whereas you can start off on a residential 30-year loan. A lot of people are just start off with house hacking, get into a duplex, rent out the other side. I just had a great conversation with a client yesterday, just got pre-approved. She's ready to start shopping. She came in as a first-time home buyer with the idea of, hey, I'm looking to get a duplex or a triplex because she wants that, which that was super insightful. That was a really cool conversation to have with somebody because you don't come across that all too often first time buy. Kind of pro tip on there is just making sure all those units are separately metered, especially for like your electric and gas. Sometimes for the multifamily building, water might be included, or there might be one water bill, which is going to be sent to you as the owner. And so maybe you just prorate that into the rent. But ideally all your other utilities are separately metered. And I would even say it'd be good if you got your water done in there as well, where that's all separate, because you can just run into problems. I've seen it, people running, crazy water bills or things like that because they're running a laundry service out of their apartment or something like that, washing clothes for everybody else for money, and they don't care about the water. And so all of a sudden you get hit with this giant water bill. It's just good. Part of that due diligence purpose when you're buying one of these properties is just verifying all of the utility costs associated with it. Yeah, Will.
So a lot of older properties, they are bundled together. What would be the best workaround about that? Just not invest in that property, or Like, is there a way?
If all the utilities are separate, I mean, without doing a complete like rewire. I
Yeah.
mean, certainly that would be one way, right? It's just like, okay, let's go ahead and throw on separate meters and install all that, which I don't know. I just put on a new panel on a house recently and that was $1,200-1,500, something like that. So it can add up. It might be worth it
Yeah,
initially.
Got a factor in.
Yeah, and I think it would probably just depend on the state of the property that you're getting into. If it's something that's basically you could just go blow over and you already know you're kind of come and drop 100K into this thing to get it moving, then maybe, yeah, that's just a cost that you just eat right off the bat. And okay, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this thing up and reset it up. Or if it's say zoned the right way, if it's maybe zoned R2 or zoned commercial or zoned as like an office, but it happens to look like a single family home, which we see in kind of some historic areas, kind of like where you live, right? It's like you've got kind of weird overlays where a home might be zoned as like a duplex, but it was used to be a duplex way back and then it got converted into a single family, but now it's open to doing both. I think it would just depend overall on just what you're going into, what just the deal looks like, right? If I'm going to dump 100K into this thing, but it all makes sense to separate it all out and just get it done now, sure. But if it's largely turnkey, I would think maybe just prorate it into the rents at that point, or just don't even buy it and just keep moving. That might just be one you just look past entirely and keep it moving. But it's a fair point. I mean, I'm certainly open to anybody else's thoughts on
I
there.
guess it depends purchase price.
Right.
If it's a good enough deal and you factor that cost in there, okay.
Then sure.
There's no room to do those, that large of a renovation and changing meters, which essentially means you're gonna have to rewire the house or the units, so they're separately metered. Then if there's no room there.
Yeah.
You would just have to rent it, utilities included.
Yeah. Yeah. You just build it in and then just be hyper vigilant on that utility bill when that's coming in and just seeing like, okay, what's the average? And that's part of just buying the property in general, right? When you're buying these bigger properties, you're buying a business, right? It's at the end of the day, you're buying a business, and at times you're buying a business with problems that you're coming in. That's why you're getting the deal, is to come in and buy this and solve those problems. And so, but just not taking maybe even the seller, even the listing agent's word on it right off the bat, as far as like, okay, here's some of the financials and here's the line items of utility costs and stuff like that. Like, you would want to go another step further and like, well, I'd like to see copies of those bills from KUB or wherever, just to see a timeline, ideally over the course of a year, where those utilities like rise and fall. You can do that, I know, in Knoxville, even on like a single family home. If somebody's say buying a house and you want to check the utilities for like your buyers, or what's the high low, you can call KUB and say, hey, I'm working on this real estate transaction. I'd like to just get kind of a high low on the utilities for 123 Main Street. And that's of course going to vary depending on who's living in the home, how many people, but you can at least get a good idea of what these utilities are going to look like before somebody even buys it. And I think our highest times are like January, February, when everybody's kind of running their heat. And then like July tends to be the other peak when AC is just maxed out.
In some cases with residential properties, though, you can do an annual average and average out what's happening. Can you do that in this case as well?
In like multifamily,
If you go not over 5 units, but like if you were doing like the duplex and triplex, like you're purchasing that, it's all on 1 meter.
yeah.
Is it possible that you could treat it the same way?
I mean, just for us, or you mean with KUB?
Yeah, like with the utility company. Like instead of you having this crazy swing in utility bills
Yeah.
throughout the year.
Yeah, oh,
Question
can you
mark, I
just,
don't know the answer.
oh, like, if, I think what you're asking is
Well,
like,
can
can I
you
just
do
pay like a flat
annualized-
rate or whatever? Like, okay, it's this month. I believe so.
So
Yeah.
I did KUB and LCUB as average, so I didn't have like these swings from winter to summer.
Right.
Electricity and
Yeah, you
gas.
just pay your.
I mean, it fluctuates, but it's not a, oh,
If you're on a
Shock,
residential
yeah.
meter, you should be able to, if it's like 4 or less, I can't see why it would be any different.
No,
Yeah.
I wouldn't see why it would be either.
It's just a way to mitigate the risk of you having someone, having a rock band out of their apartment.
Sure. Yeah, that would be an interesting way to do it too. And then you just prorate that into your, into what you're charging your tenants at the end of the day. Sure. But ideally, the golden move is just it's all separate.
Well,
They pay their own.
the other thing you can do if we're talking about getting a little into the with KEB is they can come out and do an energy audit for you, especially if you're buying a new place. That's a good idea. Right, so that you can take a look at windows, insulation, because that's the big factor. I used to think I wanted to live in one of those historic neighborhoods, and then I lived in one of those houses, no insulation.
Yeah.
Windows don't open, have black molds.
Yeah.
I've gotten over the
The
romanticism.
walls are stuffed with
Yes.
newspaper and stuff like that. And that's what's trying to keep you warm.
Yeah,
Right.
that's,
Just stuff it with the newspaper, then light it. And keep you warm.
There you go. Right. So just to kind of, we touched on kind of some 5-unit multifamily properties. 5 or more is going to require that commercial loan. So you're looking at least 20% down when you're purchasing those properties. You know, again, you're buying this as a business, and so your job is to go in there, create some value in that business by minimizing those expenses, ideally fixing it up and adding some value, increasing the rents over time. That's going to go ahead and ultimately make it worth more and put more money in your pocket in the day if you decide to sell it, or just, you know, increase your bottom line to what you're putting in your pocket on a monthly basis. So right now we'll kind of dive into some of the numbers overall just to understand on these. So just your net income is what we're really driving a lot of these from. So that's just going to be the total money that's coming in after you factor out your other expenses. So your job as the operator is to go ahead and increase that net income on it all. So how to take that income, we kind of broke down this one really simple here deal. If you could ever find this deal, buy it in a heartbeat. If you can find a 25 cap, like it's all yours. This is just an example I had like online, just to make the numbers a little bit easier to understand as a breakdown. And so this gross income on this property is going to be at $40,000 a year. We're going to go ahead and take that, subtract our taxes. We're going to subtract $3,000 for maintenance. We're going to take off another $8,000 for insurance. That's going to leave us with $24,000 as a net income. We're going to divide that by the purchase price of the asset, which in this case was $95,000. And so again, if you ever find this deal, like tell me, or just don't tell me and just buy it, because I'll take that all day long. But that's going to put this at a 25% cap rate or kind of return on that. So we'll kind of do another one real quick. So cap rates and income level, we're going to take a property at $400,000. This is if you wanted to find out what that income level would need to be in order to hit a particular cap rate. So this can work a few different ways. If you want to look at a property and figure, what do I need to buy this property for if I want to have this kind of return, or what do I need to get this property to in order to have this kind of this cap rate?
or a simple way to say it would just be, if I see this and I don't know, I see it's got blank cap rate.
Yeah.
Purchase price times cap rate gives you your income.
Income.
Because I had no idea when I started. I was like, I don't want cap
Right.
rate.
So, you know, in this case, we'll take a property of $400,000. We got an 8% cap rate. So it's times 8% equals $32,000 as our income on this property. If we're also going to look at it, we can do it a few different ways here as well. If you got, say, a $9,000 gross income, take off your property management fees, maintenance, taxes, insurance, leaves you down with $62.90 net income. Divide that by your $40,000 purchase price equals a 15% cap rate, which is also a smoking deal. Depending where you live on this country, you might still be able to find those properties that are $40,000, things like that. I mean, I think you stay here into the middle of the country, all through the Midwest, Ohio, Kentucky, Iowa, Tennessee. I mean, it's way out spots at this point. Knoxville used to be this way back in the good old days of what, 3-4 years ago.
Let's talk, what kind of cap rates are you seeing?
Yeah.
On the, well, I should say, I'd be kind of curious, what kind of cap rates are you seeing on the buy side? Not after, once I improve, I know some people are getting great cap rates.
Sure.
You guys have a lot of value. On the buy side, I'm seeing less than 10.
Is it less than 10?
But I mean, that it's,
if it's anywhere on the market.
Yeah, most average that I'm seeing right now on the market is anywhere between 6 and 8. It's rare I've found anything on market that's above 8%. Like some, like maybe you could make it work. I don't know. There's 2 triplexes in Park Ridge that are super appealing. That right now you could pick them up for probably it'd be a 7 cap rate. But honestly, after the value add, and it just depends on how much is in there. I honestly think it could be a huge winner because you have 2 triplexes side by side.
I think the play there is take your cash flow and bank on that stadium
Yeah.
and Park Ridge continuing to boom because I don't think it's tapped out.
Mhm.
I would agree, yeah. Anything, if you're holding anything in that area.
Yeah, we're building in East Knoxville, we're building on Jefferson right now, like Cherry and Jefferson and on Washington and, you know, and I like that area. I've lived in that area, like it's because you're 6 minutes from downtown.
Yeah, super close to downtown on average. And I've been asking folks from around the country just in talks of like, hey, what are you seeing on average in your market that people are buying? You know, what's a good deal to you? And of course, everybody wants 10+%, and that's all great. I mean, it's not to say it can't be done, but I've also just tried to get real with them, right? So my friend Darnell down in South Florida, I was like, what are you seeing, man, on cap rates right now? You know, he's like, man, it's 3 to 5 on average, like down there.
See, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I mean, here it's better.
if
and-
you're around here getting 6 to 9, it's pretty
It's
good.
pretty good. And so
Selling to everyone who's accepting 3.
well, and it's because I've looked at it as far as just trying to understand what's a deal to you depending on where you are in the country, you know, and we in Knoxville have been largely spoiled for quite a while now at this point, as far as just property values being under. Now a lot of folks are moving to the area. There's a lot of homes and properties being updated. And, you know, I've shopped out deals locally to folks that if it's not 10% or more, they don't want to touch it. But then I've gone ahead and shopped out to folks, say on the West Coast or down in Florida, where they're getting, you know, a 3 to 5%. And if I can show them a 6 to 8, you know, they'll take that all day long for sure.
One of the things for anyone that's viewing this recording live, like Rob, or at home, is keep in mind that example of the cap rate doesn't have any debt service. That's if you're
Yeah,
paying,
that's true.
paying full cash.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're buying this with a mortgage, you gotta factor in what is that rate? And most of the time, when you see a cap rate, if I'm looking on the commercial MLS, it often doesn't include debt service. It's cash on cash return.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the same as if you've got 20%, you know, down, and then what is
Sure.
that return? And
I mean, luckily, debt is ridiculously cheap right
Correct.
now, so you're in a good place, but yeah.
yeah, thankfully money's cheap to borrow overall. And there's a few properties that are out there even on the MLS that I would say they just do a pretty good job of breaking that math down in some of those document files, like saved onto the MLS. So you can go in there and actually look and show the breakdown. And they do it both as a cash on cash return, as well as, okay, here this is with, you know, 20% down, and your you end up cash flow and say like, I don't know, $7,000 over the course of a year or something like that, which ain't not really much, but it covers itself and still has enough room for extra. That's just if you're not looking for this money to like live on right now, and you're just wanting this asset to pay for itself. You know, you can depreciate it over time, hang on to this, kind of keep fixing it up and just kind of ride
Well,
it.
and I've noticed a lot of apartment investors, that's their strategy. They're okay with low returns on cash flow and reposition it. And in 3 years, they refinance and pull $1.5 billion out, stick in their pocket, or they sell it, you know, profit, a good lick. So
Yep.
it's, I guess it gives you multiple ways to look at apartment investing. You absolutely need the cash flow,
Mhm.
but is that what's most important to you on a specific deal?
What came to mind when we were talking about this was, and it could be a pro or a con, thinking about my experience was, when you come in there, you've got to change the culture of the building.
Yeah.
Because how do you get good tenants in? You know, and you need to get good tenants in. So going to all your paying tenants, telling them, just communicating with them, hey, we're new, we're gonna
to change things, making some immediate improvements so they feel like, some visible stuff. And then enacting policies and adding some services.
Yeah.
And, increasing rent, and adding value. That, I think that's a big piece not to miss, is that just that messaging.
Huge.
So then people renew, and then you can they're not scaring off all your good new tenants that come.
So you were managing apartments at one point?
Yeah.
Okay, what was your biggest challenge on the multifamily management side? Was it?
Just so here's what happened. It's a great real estate story. Is we had there was a guy in there selling drugs, really mild mannered guy. You wouldn't have known. He was like selling pills. I would have told you he was a very nice young guy. He was also selling young drugs to one of the young ladies that lived there, had a much older boyfriend. He didn't like the time she was spending with this young drug dealer, or whatever they were up to. So he came home, I guess, tried to choke and kill her, and then tried to set the apartment on fire. Put all the linens in the bathtub and lit them on fire. So there was, in the fiction, the cops were there. And
Wow.
that's yes.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, that is the challenge of managing apartments. Then I had you got to fix that unit and deal with just the cultural, right? What's going on? And no one was telling you, no one's gonna narc on their body. No one's telling me here's what's really
really going on in there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that those are just growing pains that go with it when you're taking, say, an asset class from a D class or a C up to a B or something like that. It's just,
and
you're
just
gonna run into those.
spending a lot of time over there,
Yeah.
talking to people, sitting on
I
the
guess
stoop on
that's
a Friday, chatting.
if you're buying in the D to C or D asset class, you need to take that into account, because it's going to be very time consuming trying to change that.
Sure.
If you can.
But it started moving, the biggest challenge was no capital.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't our asset, and then we had to go spend $5K to get the utilities turned on. We had another business going. This was all just on the side trying to help.
Yeah.
This gentleman, that was if we had purchased it as an asset and we had some capital, we could have, I think, made some changes, and we had enough experience and enough people to get it. That was the good news, is right. I think the other piece is network.
Sure.
Like, doing things like this is totally manageable when you're like, yeah, I've got a whole Rolodex of people I can call to help me and experience. And, when you don't know what you don't know, yeah.
That's when
Get people involved if you're new to this.
as
You will
much as
make more
possible.
money in the long run paying someone to help you than you will doing it.
trying to do it all on your own.
own.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where having good property management helps. and having a deep
100,
Rolodex.
it's priceless to have like a mentor. Hey, come on, man, help you make some money.
Yep.
And make money together.
Yep.
For a long period of time. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
just but
And
I'm on a team.
I
So that's
would-
kind of how I'm oriented.
I would say in those kind of situations too, that's where property managers are just invaluable. Talk about one of the more underpaid, spots for sure, for the amount of hassle that goes into it. It's always worth just to hire that piece out, whether, it's 10% or whatever of the
Yeah.
rent going out on average that's going around. That's always just a no brainer. Hire it out, help somebody help you with that for a little bit of cash. It's way worth it.
I thought the maintenance was actually easier on the apartments
Yep.
because you could schedule. You just had a maintenance schedule. You had the guys. There was enough stuff going on over there where there was we're going to consistently be there, and so that was kind of almost easier than managing the one-off stuff with the houses.
Yeah. And so when you're analyzing some of these deals, you take into account, what's going on in the area, see if you can compare it to some nearby properties as well, so that you can better understand really where this value needs to be, especially if it's more of a deal, kind of a more of a rundown, maybe a D or a C class asset that you're trying to bring up. Look for some of the models around you of what you're just trying to get them to at the end of the day, right? Because as your property comes up, you're going to help them rise in value, and kind of vice versa. So you can use that cap rate to justify the income level of the property, if you know kind of what the average cap rate is around it. It's kind of another helpful way for you to analyze a deal. There we go. Yeah, like as an example, right, we got this property for $400,000 in an area where similar properties have about an 8% cap rate. Then we can find a recommended income level on that by just taking that $400,000, multiplying that 0.8%, that gives us our 32 grand, and that's the amount of net income this property would need to generate in order for you to get that rate. So just keeping in mind though that you can't set rental rates based on that cap rate though. They've got to be based on market rates and market value of what's going on in that area, and then everything how it has to kind of rise over time. So not just going in to buy it and then I want this rate, and so I'm setting that as my return. It has to be in conjunction with kind of what's the going market rate around. And that's something too where just reaching out, having a good property manager, somebody that is familiar with placing tenants consistently, can help be a real advantage to you when it comes to knowing what areas you might want to invest in, whether it is single family or multifamily housing. You know, that's a pretty invaluable piece to your toolbox, is having a good property manager who can help you just understand a little bit more of the number side of, you know, what's some average or expected returns I could get for renting in this area. And so just understanding your baseline cost in that market. So an apartment building in Florida is going to have a very different costs and expenses compared to here in Tennessee or Minnesota, California, or wherever. So your job is to figure out just what's that baseline operating cost going to be? How can I shrink that and control that as much as possible, which is just going to increase your bottom line in a given market. So looking at that baseline, right, is we're looking at historical operating data and those expenses. And this is where you really want to get really granular when you're buying these properties, essentially these businesses, right? Is I don't just want to see it as a line item on a summary sheet as far as here's our net income and here's our operating expenses and here's our utilities. Awesome. Hey, I appreciate that. I'd still love to see I would love to see each lease on each property to make sure that that's there. I'd like to see the income statements to know that everybody here is in good standing. We don't have anybody in default. That we're having to maybe inherit a bad tenant there. And same thing on the utilities as well. I'd like to see, what does this run on a monthly basis? I would say over a year or ideally a 2-year spread will at least give you a pretty good baseline operating costs of a building. Especially now, right? Coming out of the last year with COVID and delinquency and people not paying rents and things like that. Really now more than ever is where you're really wanting to verify those leases are in place, that you at least got something on paper. If it's month to month, where nobody's been on a lease in a property for years, like some buddies of mine have got lately, where they bought, a duplex and a 5-unit building, and none of those properties had like good leases. It was all like month to month with tenants that had been there a long time, and it was just kind of taking people at their word and things like that. But lo and behold, some of those folks were actually 6 months behind on rent and things like that. And so then we had to go in there and work out some of those deals with those folks, or try to get them back into a paying circumstance, or just saying, hey, right, we really don't want to go down this eviction path. And I've always found if you just come to people with humility, extend them some grace, oftentimes it gets you a lot further. So in that instance where it was a duplex, some buddies and I kind of partnered on, we had the gal in the front unit had been paying, the one in the back had not for quite a while, and didn't really have any plans on starting anytime soon. And so rather than going down the eviction path with her, we just said, hey, look, like, I understand things are a little bit challenging right now. You're not happy here. We need to kind of work something out, amicably. And so we agreed to give her, it was about 45 days to vacate. We weren't going to take that next month's rent. And we also gave her security deposit back, because that like $600 to us, while it's not a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, is not that huge and is way more important to that tenant at that time than it is to me to be a Grinch and hang on to your $600 because the unit's trash and you haven't paid and whatever.
It's gonna cost you.
Correct. It's going to cost me more to fight to either evict her out of there and things like that. And so if you can go to someone and say, hey, look, obviously we're at some kind of an impasse here. What can we work out just on a human type basis of, hey, if it makes sense, maybe I don't take a month's rent from you and here's a security deposit back so you can have that money to go and roll over into your next place. And now we don't have to go down the eviction road, and now you've got that on your record and it makes it harder for you to rent, blah, blah, blah. I found if you just come to people extending some grace, it gets you a lot further overall, right? So just all part of that initial due diligence. Ideally, if you can talk with some of those tenants when you're in this transitionary phase of doing some of your due diligence and looking to buy a property, if you can have a conversation with those people that are living in that building, they'll tell you a lot more than maybe the landlords or the sellers not wanting to tell you. And you can figure out, hey, like what's going to be the best value add to you that I can come in here and help fix this up. Yeah, Justin, do you have something there?
Just to back that up, so I worked, when I was down in Florida, I worked for the Delgado home team, one of the bigger REO, so real estate owned sellers in the country. They sold over 3,000 foreclosed homes. Years where they sold over 600 homes. And I worked with Walter, the owner of that team, very closely, and he kept it so simple. I was like, what's the solution? And you think it's gonna be complicated? And it was just, hey, just go talk to the person in there and work something out with them and maybe give them a free month. That's the simple solution. That's the, after doing this hundreds of times was, hey, just go talk to them and do the right thing and have a little compassion.
Yeah.
And it turns out like that's obviously the right business decision sometimes is to have some compassion.
Yeah.
Right? Things tend to work out when you're not squeezing every last penny.
Yeah, I was listening to an NPR thing the other day. It was basically about that. Like it was all about the moratoriums ending and all the complications with, settling on something, making it fair. And moral of the story, they were like, yeah, just having that actual adult conversation, without the other BS, just face to face, talking as humans is yielded, the best results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by far, right? That's just what keeps everything as clean as possible when things can otherwise get pretty muddy. Just taking the time to actually have that conversation. And so part of just doing that due diligence piece when you're looking to buy some of these multifamily properties, I found the more tenants I can talk with when I'm doing my, couple hour inspection walkthrough, things like that, all the better. Because then you really find out, hey, what's wrong? What's really been going down?
They will be happy.
They will be happy to tell you everything.
Yeah, I had one in Alcoa, like a 20 unit.
Yeah.
I almost bought, and the tenants told me more information than I would ever gain from an inspection or talking to the previous owners.
Yeah. It's like talking to neighbors, right? If we're going looking at single family homes or something like that, go over and talk to the neighbor and see like what's going on. What happens really around here? What happens when it rains for a whole day and we get 5 inches of rain all of a sudden, right? So where's the water really pool up? Neighbors, tenants, they'll all tell you a lot more than any other home inspection will on it all. So how to get started? Right? I want to buy an apartment complex or I want to buy a multifamily. So picking an area and understanding just the growth potential in there. You want to look for those areas that are growing, right? We want to look for towns that are expanding, not dying. We want to look for businesses that are moving into that area. We want to just look into the future a little bit and see what's possible and what's trending that way. So we're looking at jobs, we're looking at median income level, overall population growth. I know some friends who have invested in towns that are were on the downswing thinking that they might come back, but they just never have, right? And that's just kind of what it is now they're, the property they bought 10 years ago for 40 grand is still worth about 40 grand. There wasn't anything there. They just took a risk and, it didn't work out. So just doing your due diligence on the front end like this of identifying areas, be it, locally in your market, or maybe if you're looking in other areas of the country, looking at those kind of migration patterns that they release every year, where folks are moving to. I know we saw, was it 2020 Tennessee from, it was like U-Haul stat had the most one-way moves of like any state in the country.
First time being out in Texas and Florida.
Yeah, monstrous.
Did you see that new thing that Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge is the number two
Number 2.
Airbnb market in the country?
Yeah, and number 4 in the world, I believe.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. There we go.
Wow, there we go. Yeah, number 4 in the world. Sure.
I've got, yeah, I'm seeing some serious, yeah.
I mean, we've got a great market in our backyard.
Yep.
Are you capitalizing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why we see too, right? That's where we see a lot of out of state money, out of the country money coming and investing.
And a great short-term rental market that's never gonna change, as
Yeah.
opposed to, you know, your ADU in the hip part of town, eventually the neighbors are gonna get pissed and someone partying constantly.
Yeah.
No one's ever gonna complain about this cap, you know,
Yeah.
that's what the area is.
That's what that whole spot is. I always like to tell people like that area invented Airbnb,
Yeah.
short-term rental. They've been doing that since like
VRBO,
the 60s or
that is where it got
70s.
started, in Homeway, it got started in, they've been renting online for 20 years. That's the first place I ever heard of VRBO.
Yeah.
Was out there.
was up there. Yeah, they just been, I like to think that they just invented that whole like, you know, concept by and large. I mean, aside from probably some other areas, you know, in the country,
There was
coastal
some
spots.
when you went on there, it was a ton of, because we used to do this, we were doing a bunch of foreclosures.
Yeah.
Because this area also went through the
Mhm.
boom and bust cycle, unlike Knoxville.
Right.
Has that made timeshares obsolete pretty much?
It's a good question.
I mean, people are still.
people are still
buying.
selling them. They're still doing it.
Making a killing over there.
Yeah.
Those
I've seen them
guys-
doing work on, I mean,
Murder.
yeah, I don't think they're.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's because of an asset class or if that's because they just have perfected how to close people.
They are good at selling.
At like, I feel uncomfortable and I've said
Yeah.
yes, and now I have to go along.
Now I have to go along with the seminar.
I
and
don't know.
Soon enough, I bought into a timeshare. I came for the free lunch and now I'm a part owner in this, this building.
3 more nights.
Yeah,
More nights.
exactly. Right, exactly. So you're looking at those population growths. We're trying to understand those cap rates in a given area by just looking at some of those comps. Again, reaching out to some of those local experts, reach out to a broker, reach out to a property manager in the area. We can search for these properties, again, just through sources like the MLS or LoopNet or CoStar. Those are more commercial based websites.
Have you any experience with CoStar? What is that?
CoStar is a nationwide commercial MLS.
Is it a pay, do you have to pay for it?
There's,
I've used LoopNet quite a bit.
Mhm.
let me see if it's got a front end. I've used the back end. It might have the front end like LoopNet does,
Okay.
where you can just search it.
Yeah, where you can kind of search through it that way. Yeah, because there's different stuff that pops up. I mean, they're good to keep like all things, you know, relative as far as, you know, keeping your usual real estate search engine going, but then going into sites like LoopNet or CoStar, where you can oftentimes find just stuff that doesn't make the MLS, even commercial MLS, you know, is different than you'll see on LoopNet. We've seen, there's a really cool, like,
CoStar, you gotta pay to access their data.
is it paid access for CoStar? Okay.
Well, and I'm realizing it's harder to come by some of the commercial listings. Like I'll find it on a broker's homepage.
Yep.
And I can't find it anywhere else. So I'm realizing it's not like residential. You have to,
Commercial agents make their own markets.
yes.
They are market makers in the sense of like, just like residential agents are becoming, because it's so superheated, where they're sitting at the center of the transaction and matching buyers and sellers, often because the place is so complicated. You know, that you need.
So broker relationships are extremely
Vital.
on the.
Yeah.
Work.
And you're gonna get into more, the thing is you move into commercial, it becomes business-like. It's less emotional, it's more professionals, it's 9 to 5.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, transactions certainly take
Probably not
longer.
gonna reach that commercial broker on a Saturday.
Right.
You know, he is hanging out, he's on his boat or something. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And they just take longer, right? In general,
Yes.
like any type of commercial or multifamily deal, like I wouldn't be looking to go into that with a 30-day escrow in mind. Like ideally, it's probably gonna just take some time for just natural
90 on the short
processes.
end is
Yeah.
pretty typical for due diligence.
Yep.
There's just a lot of, I guess we can get into that. Maybe is that a slide here we're gonna talk about?
As far as just
Like
the
apartment due diligence?
the due diligence a little bit, we're going to be kind of talking here into just kind of lining up some of the money, some of the different ways to go into it, but it is
Cool.
certainly worth diving
Maybe we'll
down.
circle back at the end.
Yeah, of going down into it.
Yep.
So with these type of properties generally costing more money, if you don't have it all at once, this is certainly the opportunity to maybe dive into, your self-directed IRA, or part of a syndication. Those are topics we've kind of covered in the past a little bit. Equity lines of credit, go to local banks, or just again, like syndication, something we've talked on before that is honestly, I would say probably most people's initial way that they're going to get into this, by and large, is by some type of partnership, unless you're just rolling in with some fat pockets and you want to go all in. I would think for me, I look at it like I would just want to be put in. I would rather have a quarter or a fifth of this, and I'm not leveraged all of my money out into this deal for a little bit, smaller return.
You could have
Not
a
as
partnership set up relatively inexpensively. If you've got a local attorney, just set up an LLC, drop your articles of incorporation. Pretty straightforward, right? You put up 25%, I put up 35. We get that pro rata, and we see it all the time because we have a lot of investors that'll just form new partnerships based on the deal.
Yeah.
It
It's just
doesn't
done
take a
without
long,
money.
yeah, that's a pretty easy way to go. If you're working with a friend, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
It'll
do.
just make it easier, because you may want to sell it later, they may get divorced, just do it on the front end and delineate it. It'll make it a lot easier.
Later,
Yes.
if necessary, right? God forbid something happened, you've at least lined out all of those obstacles, or most of them that you might come across in the future. You already kind of know predetermined.
What
you're
Gary
gonna do.
Keller says, I love it, is he says we shouldn't call it an agreement, we should call it a disagreement, because it is only relevant when it's being enforced. That's the only time you're gonna look at that contract is when you have a disagreement, and now it's time to say, well, how are we splitting this thing up, or what's the,
Sure.
yes.
I like it. So some steps there, just hiring your broker, hiring a real estate agent that specializes or works in multifamily. Talk with them of what you're looking for. Call your property managers, put the word out that, hey, I'm a buyer. Just frankly tell everyone this is what I'm after. Because word travels. It's funny how things will come up in conversation that you might have had this conversation with somebody a week ago, and then you're having a different conversation with somebody else, and it's relevant, and then all of a sudden they've connected it and you're into a deal. So really just talking to people can do it. Driving for dollars in your target area is one of my favorite activities to do on, say, a Saturday morning. If the wife and kid are asleep and I'm just up early, I want to go cruise around, I'll go drive around neighborhoods that you're particularly interested in investing in, and start looking for those houses that are maybe a little bit more run down, the grass is higher, things aren't maintained well, and just reaching out and sending them letters is certainly a pretty straightforward and easy way to do it, with kind of not as a direct question. Certainly if you want to be bold and you want to look up their info and just give them a call flat out and say, hey, it's your property, and you ever thought about selling it? It's a great straightforward way. I mean, I've met a lot of my investors just by calling non-owner occupieds and saying, hey, like, you thought about selling this? Are you looking to buy? What kind of deals are you looking to buy right now? And you find some cool partnerships throughout that way. And you kind of start to maybe turn you on to some deals. But certainly just sending out letters is going to be the most straightforward way. A handwritten note. Hey, I'm interested in buying your house. You do that for every 2 weeks for 6 months or something like that. They're going to know who you are, and you're likely going to be their first call after doing that. Just
You
continually
pick up
kind of
stuff from letters later?
time over task. Yeah, you send out letters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pick up quite a few.
Really? Do you handwrite them, or do you just like outsource that? What does that look like for you?
I'll pay someone to handwrite.
Yep.
So, it's cursing on a piece of white paper, and I would have people call me back just to inform me that they wasn't interested.
Sure.
Hey, I just want to let you know, maybe in a few years, but I think we're gonna keep it. So it was, it was well worth the money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a proven method, right? I mean, people still do it. It still works. They'll respond to a handwritten note or a letter. Anyway, even if it is just to call you back and say, hey, I'm not interested, I'll take that. I'll still take that phone call. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, don't them, send me another letter.
Send them a Christmas card or something like that at that point, right? So just looking up, like I said, touched on absentee landlords, non-owner occupied, reaching out to them, sending them letters, calling them, kind of seeing what's up. From that point, you're just making offers, analyzing deals. Once you've gone ahead and kind of secured the property and doing your feasibility study, that's kind of your due diligence piece of it overall, is like how, I guess just what are our full operating expenses? You want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so basically when you write the commercial agreement in Tennessee, there's a number of clauses in there of different due diligence periods you can put in. Whether that could be zoning, it could be environmental, right, survey, and it spells it out really clearly. What I like about the contract in Tennessee is if you just take the time to read it slowly, it's pretty straightforward. There's obviously some legalese, meaning there's specific legal terms that have legal definitions, but most of it is pretty understandable. I think that would just be the biggest thing, is just going through and looking at, environmental zoning, and then just some of the basic, like, are you doing, your inspection period, which is also typically includes, the longest piece of that is analyzing the numbers.
Yeah.
Like actually getting the numbers from them, is sometimes they don't have them all together, the rent rolls, and then going through and verifying it.
Yeah, that was certainly a challenge for me on that, like, 5-unit building we did, was just getting all of those numbers together, because some of those properties were owned by a family for the last like 40 years. Some of those tenants had been there for, in one case, they had tenants in there for 30 years, which I'd never seen before. It was a duplex with tenants for same people for 30 years. Crazy. So like those leases and stuff, long gone, doesn't exist. So those were situations where we had to just go ahead and create a new lease, get them on some kind of month-to-month agreement, just to make sure that that deal closed smoothly and transitioned owners. And for that point, then the new owners had at least a month-to-month lease agreement that they could choose to extend for a year after a conversation with those tenants, and or decide to part ways, shake hands and part as friends. And then lastly, just closing on it, buying it. And so now you purchased an apartment building. Now what? Usually, right, you're going into these things, you're buying a deal that is largely in need of some kind of repair, right? You're buying a business with problems. And so that's why you're getting the deal, is because I'm now taking out a whole new set of problems. And so you're going to go in, you're going to do what we're calling kind of stabilizing the property. So that's maybe fixing things up, looking at things that are going wrong, or maybe you're just lining tenants up on some kind of a lease program because they're just frankly not on one. You're going to be adding value, updating the units as they turn. So as one unit goes, you take your time, you throw some money into it, you clean that unit up, new tenant moves in for a higher rent roll, and you just kind of keep rinse repeating over time, until ideally you kind of flip the whole building. Best way is probably just start by increasing the curb appeal of the property, just making it look welcoming to new tenants, that you can then change that tenant profile as you fix up those units. You're going to re-raise the rents. You're going to analyze the new cap rate. And usually at that point, you're going to do, you're doing essentially always kind of labeled as the BRRRR method, which is your buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and then repeat. If you can kind of keep doing that over and over again, you stabilize the property, do your refinance. So you've pulled out, your money that you've put into the property. It's now stable. Your rents are higher, so your cap rate is higher, your cash flowing good. And honestly, ride it into the sunset at that point. I mean, if you've really done that deal, some people will sell it because they just need the cash for maybe whatever reason at that time. By and large, I feel that if you're going through all of that work and time to kind of turn over a property over, I'd say on average 3 years, 5 years, these are usually longer term. It's a big flip is one way to think of it, right? Whereas a single family home might take you 4 to 6 months to flip. You're looking at probably 4 to 6 years for a bigger building. So it just takes a little bit longer, but the returns are oftentimes that much bigger as well, right? We're just playing with bigger numbers, but by and large, the math all kind of stays the same on it. So that's your thing. So that kind of covers a lot of our notes today. Certainly thanks everybody for kind of joining us on here. Make sure you leave us a review on meetup.com or on our Grid Investor Facebook page. Make sure you RSVP for next month's meeting. We're going to go ahead and probably just hang out here, connect in the room, but go out there, find some deals. And thanks so much for joining us and appreciate it. Be excellent.